Today I got a special guest, a friend of mine that I only talk to about twice a year, but I always enjoy talking to him. You probably know him. His name's Arnold Tarpley. He's the chief real estate appraiser for Bradley County. Pretty big job. It's going to be a great discussion. I can't hardly even wrap my head around it.
Yeah, it's hard to. It really is.
Did you start there with Doug Elrod?
Yes.
What, about 85, 84?
Actually, 1980.
1980.
February, the first Monday of February, 1980.
He was a great guy, wasn't he?
He was a wonderful guy.
I remember, I worked there for what, a year? 2 years?
I was trying to remember how long you was there.
I cannot remember.
Because I was working for the state at that time.
That's right. And I forget. I cannot remember for the life of me if I worked there a year or 2 years. But I had the west side of the county.
Yeah.
And what was that guy's name that had the other side? Bedwell?
C.W. Bedwell.
C.W. Bedwell. I hadn't thought of that name in years.
He passed away 3-4 years ago now, something like that.
He was different, wasn't he?
He was quite a character. He was from Arkansas.
You know what was different about him? I noticed one thing. He would back into parking spaces.
Yeah.
Why he backed into parking spaces, I had no idea. I guess I don't know.
Well, in some cases, it's easier to
back
in and pull out. Like the parking space I have assigned to me at the office now, to where it's located, it's easier to back in and pull out.
Than it is to pull in and back. But he would do that no matter if he was at Walmart or going to his... He used to back up into his driveway.
Yeah.
But he was a nice guy.
He was super nice. He was in the Lions Club with Mr. Elrod.
He was big in the Lions Club.
Very active in everything went on. Very active in his church. His wife was very active in the church.
Yep.
No children.
No children. I remember that.
On the courthouse square at 30 2nd Street is the law firm of Logan Thompson Law. Since 1965, they have served the legal needs for the good citizens of Cleveland, Bradley County. If you've got a problem, they're no problem. Give them a call.
Now, in 1980, that was when Sam, well, I say 80, because I went there about 86 maybe. That was the last real job I had before I started building. But who was that guy that was in, it was Sam Heiberger.
Sam Heiberger was county engineer.
And who was that guy that helped him?
Keith Holloway.
Whatever happened to him?
He's been a mail carrier for years.
Rural?
Yep.
What area is he?
He worked in the McDonald White Oak route.
I bet I haven't seen him in 40 years.
I haven't seen him in a while. I used to run into him every once in a while and talk to him, but I hadn't seen him in a long time.
He was real smart.
He was smart and good, another good guy.
He was a good guy.
So, yeah.
And Sam, boy, can you imagine how building permits were $25 if you got one.
Yeah, if you got
one.
Well, there wasn't building permits at all until Mr. Elrod started assigning them out of the assessor's office.
And he probably didn't want to.
He didn't want to, but he had no way of figuring out who was building a house.
That was all he did. And he only had a fee just to
cover the paperwork. I think your fees at that time was like from $1 to $5.
I remember it was $25, and they'd give them in triplicate, and you'd give them the back copy.
Yeah. But he worked out a deal with the electric company, and the septic tank permitting people, TDEC, as we know them now.
You had to have a
that-
septic permit before you give you a building permit.
Right. You had to get those things and get the permit, and they wouldn't give you electric power
Right.
until they got the permit out.
So you could
Utilities
build
and
unless you
volunteer.
didn't want power.
Right,
And that meant you could build auxiliary buildings.
right.
But that system worked fine.
Well, for what we wanted, it was all about just knowing that there's a building going up.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't realize in the late 60s and early 70s, we had a building boom similar to what we have now. This county was growing at that time.
Between the 60s and 60
Yeah.
and 70? That was probably Norman Chapel Road, Cleveland State was being built, and that
Cleveland State was built in 68. And so Mouse
probably
Creek Road.
Peerless Road was extended or something
Yeah.
like that.
And then out Mouse Creek Road, you started seeing a lot of stuff
That's
being
right.
built out there. Eldridge Acres.
Eldridge, Jim Eldridge.
Yeah,
Jim Eldridge was the big builder.
yeah. So then whenever I was in college, I spent a little bit of time working for Chuck Bashir's.
Oh, yeah, I know Chuck.
For a period of time.
As a carpenter or what?
I was going to Cleveland State at the time, architect major. And part of your study was you had to spend the summer quarter between your freshman and sophomore year in a work study situation. You found a job that you could work and would be geared towards your degree. With an architecture major, it had to be something in building. And looked around, and Chuck finally just said, okay, you can just come work for me. I went to him and asked him if he knew somebody that I could work for.
Yeah.
And he checked around, and nobody really had a place, so he put me to working for him. I pulled electric wire.
He was
Waterproof
that was sort of his.
foundations.
He was electrician.
He was
by trade, right?
By trade, he was an electrician.
He was blowing and going at that time.
Yeah. So it worked out that I spent the summer and part of that fall up until a little bit after Christmas working for him and going to school.
That reminds me. Are you related to Hazel
That's
Tarpley?
my aunt.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So she's married. She was
She was married to Chuck at the time.
right. I remember. That's what made me think of
Yeah.
that.
Hazel was Dad's youngest sister.
Is that right?
And there's
God, what was his name?
Warren. He
Warren
run the
Tarpley.
body shop at Hall Chevrolet for years.
Under Jack? Was
Under
Jack?
Jack, yeah. Well, he actually worked for Jack's father to start with. So he spent probably, all told, close to 50 years working for Hall Chevrolet. Because
And his sister was Hazel.
his youngest sister is Hazel. He had two others in between. Where Inez is actually the oldest, and then Marlene.
So your mother is who?
Janine McNabb.
Which was Hazel's.
Stepmother, or
see.
wait, actually aunt. Aunt, but they,
Yeah.
my
That's right.
Hazel's father died when she was 2 years old, so Dad and Mom was as much of her
Oh, I see.
parents as her own mother was. And what's really crazy about it is I'm closer in age to Hazel than Dad was.
I guess so.
So
I've worked for Hazel. She's really good to work for.
So she was more like a sister. She was 16, a young teenager when I was a little kid.
I see.
So when she got out dating and everything, every once in a while I'd sneak out and get to go with her on cruising or something. So,
Did you go? You went to what year did you graduate, Bradley?
1977.
Well, you haven't aged, have you? Really?
A lot of people may not think so, but I can tell it.
You really haven't changed much.
Yeah.
Now, Doug Elrod was an unsung hero, I always thought. He just was. I remember people would come in there and want to argue about their taxes, and he'd get out from that table, that desk, and he'd come and sit on those two metal chairs with them.
Yeah.
And that diffused them.
Yeah.
He wanted them to, and he wanted to listen to them and be on their level.
Yeah, he'd get right there with them, talk to them, and one of the things he'd tell them, and it stuck with me all these years, is if I can change it for anybody else, I can change it for you.
He always said that.
But if I can't change it for anybody else, I can't change it for you. The other thing he always said is anything I take off for you, I'm putting on somebody else.
Because it had to be divided. It divided up.
There's a lot of, everybody looks at the appraisal work that we do is jacking up numbers. To be honest with you, that's what most
what
people
they think. But I know better.
Yeah, but then at the same time, there's also a factor in there a lot of people don't realize called equalization. And the idea is that if you have equal properties, they should be appraised the same. So that's, and that's where that comes from. If he can't, if you own two identical houses, you can't have one price at $150,000, another one at $350,000.
Right.
That
maybe 152 or something.
yeah,
due
you
to
can have a
thing.
minor difference,
Yeah.
but you really have to be very similar in your pricing.
Didn't he run a grocery store out on Old Parksville Road, or
It
what was
was
it?
on Benton Pike.
Let's see, Benton Pike and Old Parksville Road in that V. Was it the V?
No, it was before you got to the viaduct, to APD 40 is where his store was.
All right, let me get this straight. Let's see. So you go down Inman Street and you take a left on Benton Pike,
Yeah,
and before you go in, boy, that's nothing there now,
Yeah.
is there?
no.
Well, I wonder what made him start that store.
Where the store was located and everything kind of got broke off because they built that new dog leg ground to go into the underpass.
Oh, that's what
Yeah.
took his down.
Yeah.
Is that when he decided?
No, he was already assessor by the time that happened. So,
He knew a lot of people. I wonder if he won big. He was there for how long?
because from 1968 to 1992.
See, people don't realize how popular he was
Yeah.
to the citizens,
And
because he never had any big competition or nothing.
His biggest competition was in 1972. Woodrow Wilson run against him.
Is that when Troy Dixon helped him beat Woodrow Wilson?
Yeah.
Do you remember Troy?
Yeah, I remember Troy very well. There's nobody in town that doesn't remember Troy.
He was good on elections, wasn't he?
He was smart. He watched that stuff. He studied it.
He was the best, in my opinion. I mean, the best.
Yeah. Yeah, he'd come in into the office and give us his predictions every year.
Remember the time that he missed every one of them, and so he wrote a letter to Donna Hubbard, and he resigned as the prognosticator. He wrote her an official letter.
Yeah. Oh, he was a mess.
He'd come in there on Fridays, wouldn't he? Because he'd get off. Well, he worked for Doug.
He worked for Doug along with Paul Elrod for a number of years.
And Gene Officer.
And Gene Officer worked there. There was quite a crew right there.
Gene's the one that got Doug to hire me.
Yeah. So it's.
I think, yeah.
Yeah. So that was a group. And of course,
That
Paul
was a group.
Elrod actually went on to work with Wilbur Ricketts, who worked for Mr. Elrod at Hamilton County for a while.
That's
And
right.
then he went into the banking industry.
If you think of all the people that worked for Doug Elrod, they all fared well.
Yeah.
Troy, he got his job with the
T-Dot.
TDOT as the chief appraiser,
Yeah.
wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. He was chief
That's what-
appraiser for this region.
For this region,
Yeah.
which was a pretty big deal.
Yeah. It goes all the way to the Kentucky border.
Yeah,
So,
he was a big deal
Yeah.
on that end. And then you got Wilbur Ricketts,
he was chief appraiser for Hamilton County for many years.
and then who'd you say? Paul Elrod.
Paul
I remember
Elrod.
him.
He went into appraisal and banking and did that for many years. Still around. See him every once
I
in a
don't
while.
ever see Paul. Who else was there? Seems like there was somebody else that Stanley, of course.
Yeah, Stanley. Joe, and his last name flies out my head right now. He did title work for many years.
Rayburn?
Yeah.
Joe Rayburn.
Joe Rayburn.
Yeah, he died, didn't he?
Yeah, he passed away a number
Yeah.
of years ago.
Yeah, Joe Rayburn.
Yeah.
I think his daughter married
Yeah.
Joey Richmond, I believe.
Yeah.
Boy, it's a small
No.
world.
No. I don't. Not him.
I got them mixed
Yeah,
up.
got mixed up. Right.
Yeah.
She still owns part of the property and has a wedding venue on the property now.
Oh,
where
that's
she grew
right.
up.
That's right.
So, she
She married somebody I knew.
Yeah.
Oh.
But yeah, that was quite a there was a number of good people there.
That was when Jute Miller was in office.
Yeah. Jute
And,
would have been off. Red Doctor was in
Red
office
Doctor,
before.
Yeah, and then you had Odell Swafford.
Yeah, he took the registrar's office after Jimmy Logan retired.
So, and now, some of it's across the street where you're at with Stanley.
Yeah.
But that job is totally different now. I'd say Doug would have a hard time navigating that today.
It was changing towards the end of his term. It was up until then, it was pretty much just go out and pick up new construction. And we had he went through 2 revaluations, 1976 and then 13 years later, 1986. And those are the only 2 he went through. And then towards the end of the 80s, they changed it, the law, where you had to do reevals every 6 years. And so that was about the time he got out, but he was on the very front end of starting to do the review projects and everything for the revals that we'd start to be required to do.
Why was it he retired? I can't remember.
Well, he was 66.
He seemed old to me then, didn't you?
Yeah, not really. I mean,
To me, he seemed older than that.
yeah, but
He had foot problems.
yeah. Yeah, then of course his wife, Mrs. Elrod, had
Yeah.
her physical problems too,
Right.
which was far worse than
Far
his.
worse, yeah.
Yeah, and of course Charlie worked there for a little while.
I remember Charlie. Whatever happened to him? He
He's
moved
in
away.
Fort Worth, Texas, in
Preaching?
children's ministries. What he went out there for.
He was smart too.
Yeah,
I guess one of the smartest is Wayne, though, right? Wayne Ormby.
you give us different stories on that. You know, he's sharp.
He's sharp.
There's no 2 ways about it. So he'll get on something, and
He's like a bulldog. He's just not going to turn loose, is he?
And of course, he started out in the office as a mapper.
He was a mapper. That's what I started out as.
Yeah, and then that's what I started out as. That's what Stanley started as. So
How did you get to know Doug?
I just graduated school
From
not-
from Cleveland State?
from Cleveland State in '79 with architecture major, and the bottom kind of dropped out in the building industry. That was one of those little recessions. Right about that
79
time.
to 81, something like that.
Yeah, and up until that time, if you could get 2 years in on your own, a lot of times architects would pick up the tab for another 2 years because they was needing draftsmen. They was needing people to draw. And it's not like computers today.
Yeah.
You drew everything by hand with pencil lead and
Yeah.
what. So I got my 2 years in. The bottom dropped everything out of everything, and so you had licensed architects looking for jobs. And there's no way that they're going to hire a 2-year,
Yeah.
graduate student to start doing anything. So I was looking for a job, and I found a little job out of Chattanooga, just delivery, graphic arts delivery, printing supplies, things like that. And then Mr. Elrod, or Mr. Adams, drafting teacher at Bradley Central, called me out of the blue and says, "Hey, what are you doing? What kind of work you doing?" I told him I was working, delivering this stuff and everything. And he pops back and he says, "Well, I have somebody that's looking for somebody who can draw." I says, "Why don't you contact Mr. Elrod at the assessor's office?" So Mr. Adams contacted him, told him I was going to be calling. I called him, went up there one night, interviewed for the job, got it.
Did you know him prior?
No, I'd never met him. Now, I knew Charlie, but I'd never met Mr. Elrod. So
And that was in what, 79?
that was when I interviewed for the job, probably was either late December 79 or very early January in 80, because I went to work for him in February.
Do they still do mapping like they did? Or is it How do they do the deeds now when they get a deed where it's like it's got a division?
The process has changed a little bit as far as how we go about it in the office. When we first went in, Wayne and I went and got the deeds from the registrar's office every day, carried them down through, and wrote up the transfer cards and read the deeds, determined whether they was going to be splits or if they're straight transfers, and did all that, then held out the transfers while we processed the straight transfers on through the system. And then we'd read the deeds and pull the maps and draw it all out with pencil and paper, straight edges and all that.
Yeah.
And it was labor-intensive business to do all that. And then we then go on and put it on permanent media so that we could make more copies of maps later on. Today,
melamine, right?
Yeah. So today, you do a lot of the same things, but the mapping's all done on computer. It's what we call geographic information systems. And so, whereas we drew everything by hand before, they go in the computer and draw it on the computer program that's designed for that.
But they still do it. It's just the
Yes.
methods different.
It's just the methods have changed. They still do the same thing.
Where they get the deeds? They have to go get them, or is it on? They have to get on.
All the deeds are computerized now. They're scanned into the system and everything, and we have access to the system that they use in the registrar's office. So we have a girl in the office that just pulls up their deed list every day and just prints out the deeds.
And then you do it, but just by computer. Is there still 2 mappers, or has that had to increase?
It's down to, we had 2 mappers up until last year when one left for another opportunity, and right now we're down to 1 mapper. So, and I don't know that we'll ever do 2 mappers again, because whereas when we was there to start off with, you did a work map, a public map, a mini map, and then you did a mini map on Chronar, which is the permanent media, and a full-size map on Mylar, which was the permanent. So you did the drawing 5 times every time you did a change.
Yeah.
So now you just do it in the computer 1 time, so it's done.
And that's not exactly supposed to be the be-all, end-all. That's for tax purposes.
It's for tax purposes only. There is a lot of people want to say where that line is where that line is, and that's not necessarily true, because there's too much information that has never been portrayed as accurately as it needs to be.
Yeah.
I mean, we're working, when we was drawing, we was working on a scale of 1 inch equals 400 feet. Well, a pencil line is 20 feet.
Yeah.
I mean, so, and then you're doing this off aerial photography by hand to get the base and everything. And then at the time, you go back to read some of the deeds and, starting in the creek or in the middle of the creek between the corner of the garden and the corner of the barn.
So you've got to figure out where the creek is first.
And then you got to figure out where the barn is and where the garden is. So, it's...
I'd say that lot lines are a thing that's ambiguous, really, unless you have a survey.
We recommend everybody to have an actual physical survey if they have any questions as to where their lines are. Because now, granted, we do the best we can.
Yeah.
I mean, we want our maps to be as accurate as possible. And with the technology they have today, with the surveyors able to go out and locate corners by GPS, and they draw everything out that way now, and it's all done in CAD systems. So it's very accurate today. And so we can take that same information and plug it in our GIS map and put the point exactly the same thing GPS-wise as what they found.
Yeah.
So we can make it today just like what the surveyor says. But there's too much information that's not accurate that we got to fit around all that stuff. So it's...
And that's really not had much to do differently from the value, if it's off a foot or 2 foot.
A tax map is really designed to give us a reasonable location and a reasonable value as to the size of the property. You might have a deed call that says 100 acres. Well, when you get it drawn out on the map and everything, it might be 105 acres or it might be 95 acres. And I know you've seen the deeds just like I do, say 40 acres more or less.
Right, yeah.
So,
And it's 43.
yeah. So, it's the whole thing is to be sure that you do it as accurately as you can, but tax maps are only to locate and give a reasonable idea of how much property is there for tax purposes only.
You can still go to the courthouse and get a copy of your.
Yeah.
But not, you don't, do they pull them out of those things now and the jacket's all done computer?
We pull it up on the GIS system by the computer and just say, this is what we want to draw out there and print out, and hit the print button and it comes out on the printer.
Is it, they used to have the Patriot system. That's not that no more.
We don't do that anymore. We started out in CAS, which is a computer-assisted appraisal system run by the state of Tennessee. We run that for years. When they first, Bradley County was the pilot county for that system back in the 70s. And then they did a revamp of it. It didn't, what I called CAS 2, didn't last very long. It wasn't real good. And then they went to another version called CAS 3, which was more online. It was really better. And then they come up with another version that was more geared towards use Windows programs instead of DOS programs. And then they was going to do away with CAS and develop a complete new system. And one of Stanley's desires for years had been to go out on her own. So he took that opportunity to do the Patriot system, which was a independent.
That worked good.
We did it all in-house. The only thing we had help with was Patriot Company would help us with questions and instruction on how to do stuff. But we did all the appraisal work, did everything in-house from our office. And it was quite a learning experience.
I remember that one. It worked good.
It really worked good. It's a good program and everything. But the problem is Patriot sold to another company. Some of the back end help was not as prevalent as it was before. And then at the same time, we didn't have enough IT support inside the county to really feel comfortable continuing on. So Stanley's looking at the idea that I'm about to retire, and he's looking at the next person that comes in after him, which he's 58 years old himself. So he's looking at the future. So we went back to the state system, which is called Impact, and we've been figuring it out over the last couple of years.
But if you go on, the average person that's going to look up property owners just to see about how big something is Tennessee GIS about the best thing?
It's about as good as anything you're going to find, because it uses the Esri mapping system, which is pretty much standard across the entire United States.
Well, could you just go to Esri?
No, they build the product and sell the product to the states and the counties, but you have to go to the local websites, whether it be the state or the county,
What
to actually
I've
look at the
found that's
information.
aggravating about the Tennessee GIS is if you're looking for something and you're going up through Charleston, when you get into McMinn County, you have to go to a whole nother site. You can't just go through there like you would Google Maps.
Yeah, every county handles its own stuff, so it pretty much divided up throughout the state that way.
And then you get some counties that don't even do it. So now you got to go back to them and go probably the old way. Is there a lot of them?
No, all the states pretty much are on. All the counties are on GIS now through the state. It's just that depends on which counties have the staff to do better than other stuff. Like you take Polk County, who doesn't have a very big staff and everything, they still do a lot of their work by hand in the office and send it to the state, and they actually publish the maps and everything.
And that's found on Tennessee GIS.
Yeah.
But then if you hit that aerial view, that's not that up to date.
That's where you really run into a big difference from county to county. Is most of the counties, particularly like Polk and some of the others smaller like that, use the aerial photography that the state is supplying, which is maybe it's better than what it used to be, but it's not the greatest in the world.
Maybe off
We-
4 feet or
Yeah,
something.
like if you go to our website and look at our aerial photography that's in the background behind it, we subcontract that out to another entity called NextMap. And they fly every year, and we get a copy of that. It costs us a little bit of money to do this, but we have maps to the point that I can actually measure manhole covers.
So does it work similar to Google Maps?
Yeah, it works a whole lot similar.
But it's not the same company.
It's not the same thing.
So that's that's where you go into Bradley County Assessor's Office, tax maps, and then
Yeah.
go deeper.
Yeah. So, but you know,
But so it does have aerial. I didn't realize they had aerial.
yeah,
on
they've
that.
got aerials for everything in the county. You just have to click on the right buttons to find
When
it.
I'm looking at something, I've usually got GIS up,
Yeah.
a topo
Yeah.
thing, and then I've got Google Maps, and I'm comparing all three
Yeah.
of them, and it gets very annoying.
Yeah, it can get real annoying because I've had to do the same thing at times.
I mean,
It's
so Stanley's may be as
if you get into our stuff, it's probably about as accurate as anything you find. And if you really need to see something really tight, just come into the office. The girls in the front can pull it up, and you'd be amazed at the accuracy of what we can do in the office
see.
with the photography and everything.
now. When you left after Doug's, you went to work for the state, right?
I went to work for the State Division of Property Assessments, basically doing the same thing I was doing it here.
You were stationed out of Chattanooga.
No, they actually didn't have an office in Chattanooga. I was actually working out of an office in Knoxville. But I was lucky in the standpoint that I was able to maintain my residence here in Cleveland.
So you just drove.
Hell, at the time we was doing revaluations, so they was typically 1 to 2 year projects anywhere we was going, depending on what needed to be done. And when I went on with the state in 1987, they was working on a project in Sevier County. And at the time, Sevier County's project was not on the computer system. So it was initially planned to be a 2-year project, turned into a 3-year project, and we had to remeasure and list every building in the county from
Golly.
scratch.
Golly.
So, and then code all the information in, put it in the computer, and do all the appraisals. So it was quite a labor
That'd be hard to
intensive.
do in 3 years, wouldn't it?
It was a job. They had at times upwards of 30 people working out of that office on that project. And at the time, I was still based in Cleveland, but I was going up and staying in a motel all week, every week, because that's an hour and a half drive
Yeah.
every day. Just
Yeah.
get there, hour and a half drive back. So it
Yeah.
just was too much to do that over a long period of time. So I spent almost 2 years on that project doing that.
What then?
Do what?
What would you do then?
Oh, well, we left there after we got done the measuring listing project and turned over the reappraisal, did the hearings and everything. Then we loaded up and went to Monroe and Polk counties and started all over again. And when I worked for the state, we just rotated through the counties doing revals on a schedule that they had, whatever schedule it had to be. And there were some years I might work on 2 or 3 different revals. But I did probably somewhere around 21 different revaluations in 15 years.
You ever wondered if you should have gone into private appraisal business? I guess you've wondered that 1,000 times, haven't you?
That going back and looking at it at the time, maybe I should have. But then at the same time, that career that I've had has been pretty good too. So it's...
I'd say you've had a lot better career overall because you can be done at 5 o'clock.
Yeah, that was that, but there was a lot of times when I was working on some of those larger projects you wasn't done at 5 o'clock. I can tell you a number of times working in Sevier County that me and another guy, my regional supervisor at the time, might be working on some of those big projects like the malls and
Yeah.
stuff like that, upwards of
Golly.
midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, trying to
And you
figure
didn't
out
have
what the number needed to be.
You didn't have those automatic measurements then either, did you?
Yeah.
Automatic.
Oh, had to pull tape on everything. You And, myself, I still don't use the automatics. I pretty much pull the tape myself.
It's about as easy, isn't it?
It depends on what you're doing. Like if, and I do predominantly commercial buildings. So whenever I'm looking at a commercial building that's 130 feet long, I've got to get that measurement. And a lot of your little laser things and everything don't work that well at that distance. And then you've got to find a target that you can hit on that you can see.
Oh yeah, because if you're at the end of if you're going down a building, you got maybe you can hit you might have the downspout in your way.
Yeah. So they work great in a room like this. But when you get out there in a building like that, and I know Robbie Ray, who does private appraisals, he uses a range finder and pointer right there on the outside, and he can. In most cases, he can hit off a gutter or something like that, find something, a target that he can hit and see. But on a commercial building, you start stretching out there 100 feet or more, that's a little harder.
I always thought it'd be good to have a job where you didn't dread Monday morning. It seems like your job, you wouldn't have to dread it.
Well, I don't dread it anymore, but there was times that you go, do I really want to do this again today? Particularly when you're in hearings after a reappraisal.
Oh yeah.
You're sitting there on the phone answering questions, and you're basically answering the same question every time you pick up the phone.
Yeah.
And usually the phone, by the time you hang up the phone, it's ringing when you pick. By the time
Same
question. And so I'll be honest, there's some days that gets really old and tiresome, and you go, do I really want to get up and do that again all day today?
But you came back to work for Stanley, is that right?
Yeah, came back in 2002.
Was that like a full circle, I guess?
In a way it was, because when I left for Mr. Elrod, there was a lot of stuff I still had to learn. Working for the state, I was afforded opportunities to work on projects that I never would have seen here. In the mid-90s, we did 2 revals in Sevier County. And the first one when I worked up there, I did nothing but residential stuff. But the second one and the third one that I worked on there, I did commercials. I did all the commercials from Interstate 40 all the way through Pigeon Forge. So, and that's a whole different environment than what you're going to deal with here with predominantly residential, because that's all leases, ground leases, and triple net leases.
Easements galore.
Easements. You have to understand how the leases work, how everything fits together. You have to understand how income works up there, because everything's done on income. Nothing is cost.
Property values up there would be on the least amount, not the real estate value.
Yeah, it just depends up there. You take like Dollywood. Tried to do the appraisal on Dollywood.
God, it'd be hard. While they're working.
Yeah.
Are you doing it? Would you have to do that while the?
Well, you pretty much do that while they're open, because they're open year round. Of course, now we got most stuff measured. You don't have to go in there like we did way back.
So now you're just measuring.
But then you still have new stuff that they build, and you have to figure all that out. And then at the same time, you look at their evaluation process, and their value is not the cost of the buildings. Their value is based off how much money they generate off those ticket prices.
Boy, I hadn't thought about that.
That's an income approach. It's not a real estate.
It boils down to ticket prices.
Yeah. What is the income? Because think about it. Our job is to determine market value.
Of the real estate.
Of the real estate.
Of the real estate, but that would be...
Doing your office.
Yeah. That'd be fairly simple, right?
Yeah. The value of it is the real estate. You go to the motel out here on Huff Parkway. The value is the real estate, but you've got to look at the income approach from the standpoint, is this particular motel generating an income to make the value more than what the real estate is. So, and that's a lot of stuff that I didn't know, that I didn't learn until I went to work for the state.
And that would be caused by location, But that would be irrelevant to you. It's the income. It could be a bad location and a good income, I guess.
Yeah, you can see situations where your income is there, whether it's a great location or not.
Right. So it almost starts to go against the old location that we've grown up to believe, but
It can,
growth,
but usually it doesn't.
So it's sort of-
Usually you'll find the correlation is location, and high
Usually.
income.
but not always, right?
Not always. I've seen a few places that generated an income that was going, wow, how are they doing that? That's some good advertising going
Yeah.
on there. So,
I guess maybe it's got to be it's got to be a good location though. It could be management, I guess.
If you're going to run a commercial business, typically it's got to be a good location, or it's got to have something.
Of course, it could be an old rundown motel in a great location that just.
Yeah.
I guess that could be it, right?
You run into that more often than you do the other way, where
Yeah,
it's just
right.
it's a old motel that the real estate's probably not all that good, but the location is superb. Now, I'll give you an example. There was a motel in Pigeon Forge called the Grand Motel. Everybody that was up there in the 80s knew about the Grand. Big motel, 400 rooms, had a waterfall in the lobby, had a swimming pool, and they had live music out by the
Wasn't it
pool in
up?
the summer.
Was it up a hill?
No, it was right there in the middle of the drag,
Right.
right on the river and everything. And if you actually looked at the building, the building was not that good. It's just a concrete block shell. You know, the rooms were just barely more than concrete block themselves. But the income on it was great because it was centrally located in the middle of the strip. So, that's one that I always thought was the building did not support what you would think that building ought to be when you looked at the income.
Boy, that's all that gets more complicated than I realized.
Yeah, and like I said, I had the opportunity to learn that side of stuff that I probably wouldn't have had a very good opportunity here to learn.
And probably in that, working for that type of stuff, you don't have to worry about the highs and the lows of the economy and too much to do and not enough to do and all that stuff.
Yeah.
More of an even kill.
It can be, but the thing of it is, you take like working in Severe, you're always cognizant of the rod runs, the leaf season. You know, those were the peaks. When I first went to work up there in Sevier County, and I was staying in Gatlinburg for a period of time in one of the motels up there, and in the wintertime, the restaurants was closed by 7 o'clock. Could you imagine a restaurant in
It couldn't make it.
Gatlinburg
Yeah.
closing at 7 o'clock
Yeah.
now?
Couldn't make it.
No, they stay open now, but back then, Wendy's, if I wanted to go to Wendy's to get something to eat, either I got out and went at 6 o'clock to get there before they closed the doors, or I went back to Pigeon Forge.
Boy, that place has changed, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Do you think Blue Ridge will ever be like that?
I kind of doubt it. It's Pigeon Forge and Gatlin. The biggest thing was Gatlinburg was the entryway to the Smoky Mountains.
I remember going as a kid and there was the 10 red lights and
Yeah.
go to Cage Cove. And, But now you can't hardly get through Sevierville to get there.
Oh no, it's insane to go up there in traffic. My wife, bless her heart, she says, "Let's go to Sevierville," and I said, "I don't want to go fight that mess."
Because you know what it's like.
Yeah.
And by the time you get up to Gatlinburg, you just want to go to Cherokee.
Yeah.
Because you're kind of close.
Actually, more than likely, you can get to Gatlinburg by Cherokee about as fast as you can
Probably.
going the other way. But we've had that discussion a number of times that, I spent so much time up there working that Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge is not a huge vacation spot.
When I got married, we were going to stay at Gatlinburg for a honeymoon, and the wedding was over at 8 o'clock or something, and it was hit with that rod run.
Yeah.
And it was like 4:30 in the morning before we got there. We was both in a bad mood. I was so tired. I don't know what I was thinking.
It was really funny. We was working on the job up there, and I was sitting there going, I hit the road, and we just had to do drive-by reviews of everything at that time. We had to see everything.
Yeah.
So I was hitting the road like, I get in the office at 8 o'clock. By 8:30, I was out the door. And I didn't come in to 3:30 or 4 o'clock, and we closed and we shut down at 4:30. So every day for a week and a half, 2 weeks, I was like that. Didn't do it. I had stacks of cards on my desk. And my boss looked at me one day, one Friday, and he says, "Why do you have so many cards that you haven't finished up and give to the key punchers?" And I says, "Because next week is Rod Run week, and I can sit here in the office and do all my paperwork." He said, "That's pretty smart." But I would look at what the traffic was going to be, and I'd work my schedule where whenever the traffic was going to be the worst, I was sitting in the office and everybody else was having to fight the traffic.
That was pretty. You've always been organized, hadn't you, Arnold?
I try. Sometimes it don't work out like I wanted to, but
What made you organized? Would you be like that as a kid?
not really so much organized. Now, Mom and Dad always made me, put stuff up and keep stuff up. I could get out and play, but, at the end of the day, stuff went back where it's supposed to go. And that's basic organization, is just putting the stuff back in the same place every time.
Yeah.
That's what I tell people, is just be organized, just put it in the same place all the time,
That's too simple, isn't it?
Yeah. But, and the thing of it is, you do the volume of work that we do, if you don't keep some kind of system going, you'll get totally lost.
Yeah, if you're real busy, you'll get real organized.
Yeah.
Or
You're one that stays pretty organized.
I stay organized to a fault. It's really it's kind of a disease on my end. I don't know if it's OCD or what.
But it works.
It works. I guess I'm happy.
Yeah.
Do you see, thinking back at those, right now we got elections coming up, and I'm not big into politics, could care less. But I do miss, back in the day, it seemed to be a little more exciting. I don't know if that was the times or if it was me. But do you remember it being more exciting or something, like maybe it was just the one-day election, maybe that was it, or maybe, maybe they had some parades, you remember? People would go down riding in the back of cars, or pancake dinners, or
I
breakfast.
think you had more of that then because you didn't have social media.
Because if you got social media, you're going to hit 500 people by a button. But back then, you better go to Blythe Avenue School, right?
Yeah.
You better go to Deer Park's music thing.
Yeah, if you was a candidate and there was something going on that was politically motivated, to see the people, you had to be there. Now, that's not to say you still didn't knock on doors.
No, Stanley knocked on doors.
Stanley knocked on a lot of doors.
I knocked on them with him.
So it was a lot of legwork. But then at the same time, you saw Stanley, he'd be at the proper corner where a lot of traffic was going by waving. He was at Deer Park for the hot dog dinner. He was at Blythe for
Avenue,
whatever they was having there. Politics at that time, that's what you did. You knocked on doors and went to the events to talk to people. Today, you still do that, but social media takes up so much of it too.
I wonder if you had a candidate that focused just on social media versus a candidate that maybe didn't focus on social media but went to all those events. I'd be interested to see who came out better, and I don't know.
I still think that the personal contact means so much.
I think you're right.
I think Stanley makes the comment one time that, somebody said that how he did some of this stuff was you knocking on so-and-so's door down on Lead Springs Road at 8 o'clock at night. That still means something.
And
I tell you the truth. It means something to me too. Because and I'm busy like everybody else. I'm not at home all the time. I find placards on my front door why I wasn't there or something. But still, somebody coming by and trying to talk to me and knocking on my door, trying to make contact means something.
You think it means something, even if you weren't there, they left a placard? Maybe that is about as good.
It means
You know, they
it
try.
catches
It's
their
better
attention.
than nothing.
Yeah, yeah. And a lot of times, whenever they do that, you don't know if it's a candidate themselves or somebody else. And
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
seen both things. I've been out on a Saturday afternoon working in the yard, and I've talked to both candidates, and then I've talked to people that's just supporters that's canvassing for them, which even that means more than just sending out flyers and in the mail and everything, and sending out social media stuff.
I ignore those, don't you? I just literally ignore them. I don't even hardly. I just go past them. I remember years ago, I was at the office and I was working late, and it was about 8 o'clock at night, and some guy knocked on the door. I was on 25th Street at John Paul's real estate office. And I went and had to unlock the door, and the guy said, "Hey, I'm out campaigning." He said, "I'm running for Congress." He said, "I'm Zach Wamp." I voted for him ever since. You know, he ran once or twice and lost and ran again and won. And, but I voted for him every time.
Yeah. That personal contact means something.
But now, if he were running for a big state thing, people say, "Well, you can't knock on all the doors." I don't know. You could try.
It's different. The bigger the area you got to deal with is different. That's true. Zach and the third district.
He was from Chattanooga and all the way down here on 25th Street.
But the fact that he makes the effort to do it, the word gets around.
Ah.
Think about
he
it.
came back. Oh, yeah, that's right.
Like I never would have known about Zach
That's
knocking
right.
on the door. Like, so you told me
That's
just
right.
now.
That's right, isn't it? He wouldn't even. So it doesn't. You don't have to necessarily be. Yeah, you're right.
But knowing that somebody's making the effort, it meant a lot to a lot of people that Stanley made the effort to knock on every door that he could.
But now, back then, I guess maybe that's what I miss about the excitement of getting to be election time and everybody's getting geared up. And
Yeah, everybody gets geared up. You have so much activity going on. And even now, you still have quite a bit of activity. You just don't see it quite as much because social media has taken over some of it. And then we have early voting.
I think maybe that too.
Yeah, whereas before, when I was in grammar school, they closed schools on election day.
Because the elections were in the schools.
Yeah.
They'd use that for the...
Yeah. Now, they still have elections in some of the schools at this point, but at that time, they would close the school for on election day. So as a grammar school kid, we was going, "Oh, boy, it's election day. We're going to get out of school."
Yeah. Didn't care who was running.
No.
Where'd you go to grammar school?
Mayfield.
Well, everybody went to Mayfield, really liked it.
I went there. The candidate they run against Mr. Elrod, Woodrow Wilson, was the principal. And he had a lot of support when he ran against Mr. Elrod because he was so well known in town. Everybody in Mayfield was probably one of the premier schools in the town at the time, because Mayfield and George R. Stewart handled everything on the northern side of town.
Wonder how Doug beat him. Troy?
I don't know if it's Troy or hard work or what it was, but he pulled it out, and it was.
I guess he knew a lot of people from the store.
He knew a lot of people from the store, and then at the same time, you've also got a little bit of that city county thing.
I guess so. Yeah. He was from the county.
He was from the county. Mr. Wilson was from the city.
Yeah.
You see some of that even today. There's everybody knows the controversy with one of our county commissioners that doesn't like the city.
That's right. There's always one of them, isn't there?
Yeah, there's.
Do you remember when Carl ran?
Yeah, it went against Stanley.
No, Carl. You're talking about Carl Shrewsbury.
Yeah.
I'm talking about Carl Collins.
Oh, yeah.
He ran against Nellum Jackson. Was we too young for that?
We was a little bit young
we was young for that.
Because Carl was in the office when I went to work for Mr. Elrod. So I didn't know.
See, Troy claims he helped Carl get in.
Oh. Yeah, I don't ever think about that election
Yeah.
because that was way before I was around.
But I don't really care about them anymore, do you? I mean, I just don't get into them. I'm lucky to
Well,
get to the vote.
I have to be a little bit different. I have to kind of get into them because my boss has to get elected.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Stanley has to get
He
elected.
didn't have an opponent, did he?
No, not this time.
Nobody'd ever run against
Yeah,
Stanley.
we had ones going to run against him last time.
Well, they wouldn't make it.
Yeah.
It'd be a waste of money.
I felt confident that Stanley was going to win.
Stanley Thompson's as good a person as you'll ever find, bar none.
Yeah. He works hard at what he does.
He does. You can depend on him.
You know, there's a lot of assessors that people say, well, he's never in the office or this or that. Stanley's in the
there.
office.
He's there.
If he's not in the office, he's got a reason not to be there. He's very hands-on. There's not anything goes on in that office that he's not aware of.
He's a good manager.
Yeah. So it's.
Do you remember, Bradley? You weren't at the old Bradley. You were at the new Bradley,
Yeah,
right?
I started the new Bradley the second year.
So I graduated there in '84. So
Yeah,
did you have agriculture, or did you have Mr. Adams?
I had Mr. Adams.
Was you in the what's that club they're in?
VICA.
VICA, yeah.
Vocational Industrial Clubs of America. Yeah, but I was actually on the first group that tried to do the Robert's Rules of Order stuff.
Oh yeah.
And so we had Mr. Lackey training us.
Well, see, I had Robert's Rules of Order under Mr. Lackey.
Yeah. So, well, we both had the same training in that area.
Same training.
But,
And well, he was tough on that, wasn't he?
he was very tough. And
That was the only thing he was tough on, was those Robert's Rules of Order.
But then at the same time, to do it right, you've got to be tough and know what procedures to follow.
Do you know, I don't tell this much, but in his class we were doing it, and I made a motion that we be dismissed. And I kept wrangling around him to where I got us dismissed, because I kept bringing it up, and
Yeah.
you can do an amendment to a thing,
Yeah.
and I finally got it to where we voted him.
Yeah.
Voted.
Yeah.
He probably don't remember that, but that's a true story.
Yeah. Oh, I bet he does remember that.
I wonder whose Robert Rules of Order. Wonder how that came about. They call it the parliamentary procedure,
Yeah.
but it's really Robert's Rules of Order, right?
Well, it describes the procedures that you've got to follow. And
Who was him, Robert's Rules of
I
Order?
can't remember the guy's name. But of course, his last name
Yeah,
was Roberts.
yeah.
But I can't remember his first name. But he developed that system to run an organized meeting in an orderly fashion. And it does set up an orderly fashion. And even
Very
though
orderly.
you don't really notice it that much, but county commission does it every meeting that they have.
See, from taking Mr. Lackey's class, I even see errors that they make.
Oh,
Do you
yeah.
see them?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, that's really not following the... Is it parliamentary procedure or Robert's Rules of Order?
Well, it's parliamentary procedure is actually what it is, but the Robert's Rules of Order is the method that you follow to do parliamentary procedure. It gives you your framework of how you do.
Parliamentary is
Yeah.
government, I guess. That's parliamentary. And then Robert's Rules of the Order that's putting the order to the procedure, I guess.
You know, how you open and close the meeting,
Yeah.
how you do your business, how you bring up motions and make amendments and vote and everything. All that's lined out in that.
Make second motions and amendment, and you
Yeah.
got to bring it back to the... But I think everybody that goes into those county commissions or city commissions, they ought to really watch the Robert's Rules of Order. I think that's a missed skill.
It really is. Now, if you get into the bigger venues, you have somebody on staff
Oh, yeah.
that really knows that.
I think we need it here. I think you need it in any government thing, because it really would help.
Well,
I guess so. If we was in big government like Congress, they probably would have somebody to say, you're
Yeah,
You're not
they
following
have
order.
somebody that, if they have a question, knows the answer according to Robert's Rules of Orders. And I actually was watching a congressional proceeding one time several years ago, and the Speaker of the House, or whoever was conducting business, Speaker of the House sometimes steps aside and has somebody else
Yeah.
runs the business of the House. They had a question, and they stopped the proceedings and went to who, I forgot who it was, but they was the authority on Robert's Rules of Order, say, oh, what is this? And I think they used it, if I remember correctly, point of order
Yeah.
is what they referred to. And they took a point of order and went down and talked to the guy in charge of that and got the procedure straight of what they needed to do whatever they wanted to do. So I'm like you, I watched the goings-ons here and everything, and I understand what they're trying to do, but then at the same time I go back, that might should have been done a little bit
That's
differently.
If I learned it right from
Yeah.
Herbert Lackey. How is he doing? I haven't seen him in 40 years, too.
I haven't really heard anything about him in a while. You know, his daughter Kim retired from principal of
Black Fox, wasn't it? Yeah.
So, and I see her on Facebook every once in a while now, but
What's
I
her
haven't really
name?
seen anything about him in a
What's
long
her
time.
name?
Kim
Kim, what's her last name?
Fisher.
Kim Fisher.
Yeah.
He'd always say, boys, if you listen to me, I'll make something out of you. Instead of saying make, he'd say make.
Yeah. So, but he did.
What about Mr. Ledford? Was you there when he was there?
He was still there, but I didn't have very much contact with him. And of course, Roy Farmer was the
I ran
principal
into.
in the vocational department at the time.
Well, I was in agriculture, and they told me to move the van. And I got in the van. Of course, I wasn't driving. It had my license,
Yeah.
but I backed up and ran right into Roy's truck. Just smashed the whole side of it. I was scared to death. And I never will forget. He came in and said, "That's all right, son. I shouldn't have had it parked there."
That sounds like Roy.
That was I never will forget that.
He was such a nice person. He
Had to have been.
He really was. And of course, Dad knew him.
Did he smoke a pipe?
I really don't know.
I think he smoked a pipe.
He may have, but Dad knew him, personally, and Hazel had him in class. So
Because he taught agriculture, and Herbert Lackey took his position.
Yeah.
Then he was in charge of the whole HO, right?
Yeah, vocational.
Vocational.
department. Yeah, and but I got to
Roy
know
Farmer.
him, and of course I knew his daughter too. His daughter was the same age I was. So
I didn't know her.
Desiree went to Mayfield with me for several
Desiree?
years. Desiree's her name.
Desiree.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. Do you still do your whoop show on the sports thing?
We've kind of had to let that go. Me and Tommy was doing it, but Tommy changed jobs. And
Tommy who?
Loftus. And he
Is that the
started working
the
in-
brokerage guy? He do stock brokerage?
No,
or-
he used to work for various Jones properties, businesses, Alan Jones's businesses, several different things. Did several different
Yeah.
things there. And then he went to work for Whirlpool in their call center. Well, he wound up working afternoons and evenings up until 6 or 7 o'clock. Well, he was working till that late at the Jones, where he worked for Mr. Jones. But the problem was, he could slip over there and do the show and everything and go back if he needed
Yeah.
to. But with them, he couldn't quite do that. So he was working till 6 or 7 o'clock at night on the call center, and we did our show from 6 to 8. And it just kind of got to the point, this wasn't going to work anymore, so we kind of let it aside. So now I do a Saturday morning show with Bullet, Robert
yeah.
Goins.
I don't know him.
He's
some
one of he's been the caretaker of the Veterans Cemetery for years, and Ron passed away, and Debbie didn't want to do the show anymore, so he went to her and said, "Do you mind if I use your time slot?" And he started doing the show on Saturday mornings.
What's it about?
Whatever comes up.
Just what time's it come on?
We start at about 10 o'clock, go to noon. We'll talk sports. We'll talk movies, old times.
Can you tell how many listeners you got?
No. Have
So
no
you
idea.
don't know.
We have no idea. He and I have no idea. We just go in, do our show. We got a few people that call regularly and take calls and play a little music and take some requests for that and everything. And then we'll do a Monday night show from 6 to 8. And it's called The Edwards Show. And Ed Webb actually started with him and Tom Cassidy.
Oh, Ed Webb, you mean the, used to work at Cleveland, Bradley Memorial?
Yes.
Ed Webb?
Yeah, that Ed Webb.
Well, he liked to talk, didn't he?
Oh, he was always wanting to, he was always asking questions.
What about, now last night, about 6 o'clock, I tuned into Doc Hollywood's show.
Was he on last night?
Oh, yeah, I really enjoy his
Yeah.
show. I mean, it's really good.
Yeah.
I just like it. Do you ever watch it?
I watch it when I can catch it. I was busy last night right up until, 6 or 6:30 or so like that, and I just never got off.
I think it came on. It might have been 6:30. But anyway, I watched the whole thing. I really like it.
He's really good. He and his girlfriend do a good job.
Yeah, yeah.
But he calls into our shows usually. And,
Solid Gold's his
yeah,
girlfriend.
Solid Gold.
Yeah,
So,
I like her.
yeah.
Does Doc's smart?
Yeah.
Don't let him fool you.
No.
He is smart.
Oh, we figured that out a long time ago.
He likes those 80s music.
Yeah. He's stuck in the 80s. There's no two ways about it.
I had him on the show. He had. It's probably like number 5 as far as many views.
Yeah.
So we're not the only ones that like him.
Yeah, I watched that show.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I tuned in and watched it. I said, I got to see what Doc has to say.
His real name's Parrish,
Yeah.
of course. So was he on your sports show? Is that right?
He was actually doing the sports show with Ron. And
Wonder how him and Ron got hooked up.
I have no
Because
idea.
that's two different people.
I have no earthly idea how they got
They're
hooked.
two different people, right?
I think they got hooked up by the station.
Maybe so. Maybe so.
Ron started the Good Sports Show with another gentleman, and he was doing another show called Happy Tracks. And Doc was doing sports with him and got into a little bit of disagreement with the management. And so Ron wound up trying to do a talk sports show by himself. Mm-hmm. Well, that don't work real good.
No. Be like me sitting here without seeing anybody.
Yeah, unless you have an awful lot of phone calls. Mm-hmm. And so I called one night, and the next thing I knew, he called me at work during the next week and said, hey, can you come in and sit with me and talk sports for here a few weeks till the rest of the crew comes back in, which Dustin, his son-in-law, was part of it. There's 2 or 3 others. Tommy Loftus, Jason Hildebrand was all on there at the time. So I said, yeah, I can come hang out. And then football started, and all of them come back in, and I figured I was out the door and everything. Ron says, no, keep coming in. Mm-hmm. So Jason eventually went over to my mix, working with Jamie Kyle doing his NASCAR show and doing some things with Cleveland football. Mm-hmm. And then Tommy and I wound up doing the college part of the Good Sports when Ron would leave after doing the high school part. And it just kind of evolved around, and then when Tommy left, we kind of had to let it go. It just wasn't going to work. We couldn't be consistent.
But Doc was on the show
But Doc was on the show whenever he could. Much like now, his schedule, he might be on one night, on another, another night. Mm-hmm. So you just never know what his schedule's going to be.
But did y'all have a drawing? You had a contest, right?
Yeah, we would have little contests. We had picking contests who can do the best picking of football games during the fall and everything.
Was it mostly high school or college?
We did high school. Now, when Tom Casta and Jeff Miller was doing their show, they did college too. And so I got involved with some of their picking on that. But our show pretty much just stays with high school sports. So
But Saturday mornings, y'all just talk about general stuff?
yeah, we...
Whatever, hey, good morning, that sort of stuff?
You never know what the caller's going to come in and talk about. Everybody's going to think we're crazy on this one, but a guy called in last Saturday morning and asked me a question. His toilet was running. His toilet was running water throughout.
What have you got to do with that, right?
Well, he said, how do you fix that? I said, well, you go get a new, the new flapper valve and all the stuff for the inside and replace it. And then this guy, he works construction. You probably know him if you actually talk to him. But he didn't know anything about plumbing, so he was asking how to fix a toilet that kept running.
But why y'all? You're just somebody there?
Yeah.
It's like he'd gone to Ace and asked him at Ace.
And he just called and asked me the question. Yeah. Of course, me being around construction my whole life,
right.
And Dad did all of his own work on his own house, and being around Chuck and them like that, most stuff like that I can do myself too.
Yeah.
So,
what end of town, Bradley County, did you grow up in?
I grew up on the east side of Cleveland, on Poplar Street.
Poplar Street.
Which is, and this is an interesting fact that I throw out at people every once in a while. All the growth in Bradley and the city of Cleveland, all the annexations, all the property line, the city limits lines has moved north, south, east, or west. But the line that run across the back of our property, we was the last street that was inside the city limits when I was growing up, is still in the same place as it was then.
Wonder why that's not moved.
Mainly
Is it
because
sewer?
The sewer was part of it, because we was the last street that had sewer. Everything behind us was those septic tanks. If they had a septic tank.
Might have had just a barrel with gravel, right?
They was doing good to have that sometimes. And the city just didn't want to take that in because of the cost to put in sewer systems.
I just never could figure that out.
Because
it's like a third world country over there in some of those places.
There's a section, and a lot of people that live in town may not know, have ever gone over there very much. And it's not as bad today as it was when I was a kid. But when I was
it worse then?
It was worse then, because I'm serious, you had sewer running out of the houses open to open ground. The back of our lot backed up to a pig pen. Serious, pigs in a pen right against our property line on the back side of the house. We was in the city, they was in the county. So
and that may still be like that.
Yeah, it could be, because they are
in the Poplar,
right.
Not popular, right?
Yeah. We was not popular very much. But that's where I grew up. First 10 years of my life, and then Mom and Dad bought my grandmother's house over next to Arnold School. So
That's
moved
a big
over there.
change, wasn't it?
That was a drastic change in this neighborhood. It actually had a sidewalk.
Yeah. That was a very big upgrade, I guess.
Yeah, and today my aunt that house is still in the family. My Aunt Hazel is actually redoing it to move into. So it's.
I bet she's doing that recently, isn't she?
They're working on it now.
I think I saw her at the countertop place a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, they're working on it right now, painting and doing a small addition and putting new siding on.
You didn't go to Arnold?
I went to Arnold for 1 year.
Like sixth grade or something?
Sixth grade.
Well, I bet that was something. You'd be not named Arnold, you're going to Arnold.
and I lived so close, I got to go home for lunch.
They allowed that?
Yeah, they allowed that at a time. I could actually leave the building, go home, and eat lunch and come back.
What'd you have, 20 minutes or 30?
I had 30 minutes.
You could make it?
Yeah.
How'd you eat so quick?
Well, my grandmother lived with us at the time. Mom was working part-time, Dad was working. My grandmother was there all day, so she knew what time my lunch hour was, so she'd have me something ready to eat when I walked in the door.
So you just walked in, ate, and headed back?
Walked back. walked to school when I went to Mayfield from Poplar.
That's a long walk.
That was.
Now let's see. Where
it
was
about-
Mayfield
it was
at the
about half a
time?
mile.
Where was Mayfield
But now
then?
Mayfield was behind Lee University then. That was the old school, not the new
That's
school you're
still a
thinking.
pretty good haul, isn't it?
Yeah, there was about a 30-minute walk
Yeah.
and I started doing that in the first grade.
Little hilly too.
A little bit
If
of
you're
hilly,
walking it.
and then you had to cross railroad tracks.
Yeah.
And at the time, you had trains you had to contend with more so than you do today. You,
Did
had
you
a
walk to
passenger
school in
train.
the first grade
Yeah,
every day or what?
every day.
By yourself?
No, I had a neighbor across the street that was a little bit older.
Uh-huh.
So my first grade year, I walked with him.
Who was he?
Alvin, and I can't remember his last name. But, he kind of was my shepherd my first grade year. And then after that, he was fifth grade. So he left Mayfield.
That was nice of him, wasn't it?
Yep, it was nice of him. And then from second grade on, I was on my own.
And you don't remember the guy's last
I
name?
can't think of his last name to save my life.
I used to ride the bus with these guys, and I can't remember their name.
Yeah.
And I feel bad about it. I wish I could see them today and say hi, but I don't.
Yeah.
Can't remember their names.
Yeah. Now there's some other kids that I walked with. Elam was one of them, and some others like that I
But the
walked
first
with.
grade was important.
The first grade, I had to learn the ropes. Had to learn how to get across the railroad tracks without getting run over by a train.
You didn't go to kindergarten?
Didn't go to kindergarten. Started first grade right
Who was
off.
the first grade teacher?
Actually had three. Mrs. Sellers, Mrs. Law, and can't remember the third one. I was only in her room for a very short time. And I remember Mrs. Sellers because she scared me to death. And I wound up in Mrs. Law's class for most of the year.
Was you good in math?
Actually, no. Math is actually my worst subject.
What's your best subject?
Probably history.
World history?
Not so much, somewhat world history, U.S. history, but that was probably my best subject. I did okay in science. I got by in English, but math was my toughest subject. And that's all I deal with now.
That's
math.
all you deal with now. That's what I was thinking. Cleveland's a good place to grow up, isn't it?
Wonderful place. Okay. Up until a certain incident, you could pretty much expect kids walking everywhere. Kids was all over the place. You get in the summertime, you walked out the door at 9 o'clock. You might go back home for lunch, leave at 1, come back home for supper.
Go back out again.
And go back out again. And your parents didn't know where you were.
I remember going down to Deer Park, just walking down there, it was walking down the sanitary food liner. Remember they had sanitary food liner?
Blue Circle.
I was a little too young for a blue circle. I remember sanitary food. You remember when they had actual checkout things that rode?
Yeah.
I mean, that was a pretty big place there.
Yeah.
They had the book nook. Remember, you couldn't go in there because they had dirty magazines or something like that?
They had adult magazines
Adult
in
magazines. Book nook.
there. Yeah. Then, but yeah, we was just running all over the place.
I don't remember an incident that happened that stopped that, but you think there was one?
Melissa,
Oh, yeah.
child abuse
What
case.
year was that? 70? Was terrible,
It was
wasn't it?
early 70s. Melissa Gibson case.
I remember that.
That's when it changed. Now it wasn't an instant change,
Just
but that's when
over the time, yeah.
That's when it changed. Now you wouldn't dare let kids run like what we did.
You just, and maybe we're to blame. I don't know. Maybe they should, but I'm not going to do it. You know what?
Yeah,
You get how many kids? You got kids?
no kids. Never been blessed or cursed.
Yeah, it's a different.
It can be it's mostly a blessing, but every once in a while, seeing what some of my friends have gone through,
Oh, it's scary.
family's gone through,
Yeah.
you go, ooh, I don't know if I want to do that.
It'll worry you to death. But what else is going on?
Oh, just,
Well, how come you come back to work for Stanley? Did you retire from the state, or how'd that work?
well, the state was changing. They was moving away from what they was doing, putting more work on the county's backs and less work on the state side. They was not replacing people. They was letting people retire or leave, and they might not, unless there's an absolute necessity, they wouldn't replace them. And so they basically downsizing is what they was doing. And my parents was getting older. Dad had already had some health problems, and the opportunity, and that, when I come back, wasn't the first time Stanley tried to get me to come back. The other time,
Stanley's smart enough to try to get you to come back
it
here.
wasn't, money wasn't working the first time around. And that's when he hired Frank Chrisman to be chief deputy for a period of time.
Yeah, that's right.
And then Frank left to go back into private practice, and Stanley come back and asked me, and we looked at the numbers, and he had elevated the pay enough that it made sense that I could do that. And the other thing was so I could come back. I'd gotten married at that point, before I was single. Life on the road with a wife is a whole different ball of wax too.
Yeah.
And I could come back home and be close, which really turned out to be a good thing because Mom and Dad both needed a lot of help.
And that was in 2002, so that, see, to me, that's not been that long ago, but it's been, I guess it's been
21, 22 years.
Can you believe that?
And Dad passed away in 2008. So I come back in 2002, and it wasn't that long after I come back before he was gone, and I was the primary caregiver for my mother for many years. So
You got brothers or sisters?
nope,
So
only
it was
child.
just you?
Just me. So it was all on me, and being on the road like I was, which usually I was working in McMinn or Polk or Loudon or Meigs, 20, 30 to 100 miles away, and something happened, I had to make my way back here. So working here, 2 miles from the house, if something happened, I could say, Stanley, I got to run.
Yeah, there'll be no
there.
problem.
Yeah. So
Did your dad work for Jack till Jack quit, or how'd that work?
Dad actually retired at 65, but he took on part-time work. For a while, he worked just in the shop doing various jobs, and then toward there later on, he started doing car transfers. And at the time, if a dealer had a car that somebody wanted, but it wasn't a different color, they'd find the color that they wanted somewhere else. Well, they'd have somebody take a car like it and go trade them out. And so Dad started doing that, and he did that up until the fall of 2007. And Dad actually wound up with brain cancer, and he got to where he couldn't drive and operate a vehicle like he needed to and everything. And it really got to the point that, he didn't need to be driving.
How did he know he had brain cancer?
He really didn't know until after we had a fall at the house.
Was he forgetting stuff or just unbalanced?
He was forgetting stuff. His balance wasn't good. For example, he and his best friend was Alan Holmes, who worked at Hart's Auto Parts for many years. And they would do transfers together. Maybe they take 2 cars, travel up together, or they take 1 car and pick up 3 cars, whatever, But they went to Beatty Chevrolet in Knoxville to did some vehicles. And Alan, started out and everything, pulled up next to the interstate, and Dad wasn't nowhere in sight. And so he stopped, and Dad had, they had cell phones at the time. They called, Alan called Dad, said, "Where you are?" He says, "I can't figure out where I am." And, he couldn't find his way from Beatty Chevrolet back to the interstate. Well, the back of Beatty Chevrolet is against the interstate. You go down to Cedar Bluff Road and get on the interstate.
But he knew enough to call them, knew their name, but still couldn't figure out what to do.
He couldn't figure out how, he was kind of, he just got lost for a minute. And some other things like that happened. And so I actually went to Jack and Jim and told them not to call Dad anymore. Something going on. And, of course, I talked to Dad afterwards, and I told him they wasn't going to call him anymore. I said, that's good, because I wasn't going to do it anymore anyway. And there for a month or so, he just wasn't quite right. And then he got really down and wound up going to the emergency room. He fell. And they said, did some tests and everything, and they thought he'd had a stroke, basically. And went to set up an appointment. This was on a Friday afternoon, and he needs to go to his doctor on Monday. Well, Sunday night we had a fall in the house, and he cracked his head pretty good. So we called 911, got an ambulance. They took it over there and did a CAT scan on his head and found a mass. And wound up at Erlanger, and that's where they determined he had brain cancer.
Gosh.
And, a very bad one, the same one that Ted Kennedy died of and everything. And that was in December. They did brain surgery on him to remove the tumor and remove as much of the cancer as they could, but they couldn't get it all because it's in places in his brain they couldn't touch. And he spent Christmas in ICU, and then they moved him to Standifer Place, and he was February of 2008, he passed away. So,
About 3 months.
yeah.
Terrible, isn't it?
But up until October, he was mowing along just fine. And then between October and February.
I'm a hypochondriac, so I may get that next week.
Oh, but it was tough.
I bet.
If I'd been on the road, it'd been trouble.
That was just a good luck, wasn't it?
Well, I was in a position where I could take off. Like, he was in the ICU, you can go down and see him like 3 times a day for 10 minutes at a time.
Yeah.
And I was lucky enough that working with Stanley, and I had time built up, I could take off, run down and see him in the ICU and come back and go back to work. And then Hazel or David or some of them would go back down in the afternoon, then I'd take Mom down that night. But I'd go by in the mornings.
So y'all worked it out to where you...
Yeah, but I'd go in the mornings and the evenings, and then his brothers and sisters would fill in during for the afternoon visit. So...
Do you still go to high school football games?
Oh, yeah. I don't...
Cleveland and Bradley, or just Bradley?
Generally Bradley. Now, if Bradley's off, or if they're out of town at a place that precludes me traveling, I'll go to Cleveland.
So you go like on Friday nights during football season, high school football. You're go to every Friday night. You're at a game.
Yeah, pretty much. Very.
See, I don't get into it that much. What makes you enjoy that?
It's like people that go to Tennessee every week, or they or they have season tickets and go to the Titans. It's just I like watching high school ball. Like going to Tennessee, it costs a ton of money to go to a UT ball game.
Yeah.
And you talk about a full season.
It's
that's
a commitment,
major
to drive that far.
monetary commitment.
Yeah.
I saw Boo Carter play at Bradley this past season. I'll probably never see him again in person play football. Unless for some reason I do go to a Tennessee game.
Well, it's always good to be involved in something you can look forward to, no matter what it is.
It comes back. Dad was a big Bradley football fan.
Yeah.
He never went to high school. Left school in 8th grade to raise his
Jack
family.
was a big high school football fan, wasn't he?
So go to the games. That was our thing, was go to the games. Hazel was a cheerleader in her high school days. Well, Dad would take me down to the ball game, and I'd see Hazel cheering. It just kind of rocked on that we always went to ball games whenever we could. And then when I got in high school,
it's more sort of your comfort zone, I guess.
it's a Friday night thing to do.
Yeah.
I mean, and think about it. What's the cost to go to a football game?
Nothing. How much is going to a high school football game nowadays?
You'll spend Tickets now is $14 to $16.
Golly, is it that much? Which is
And-
cheap, but
and then
still.
parking is a couple of
Well,
$3,
you got to
$4.
pay to park.
Oh, you got to pay to park, and that money goes to the sports and
yeah.
everything. And all this money goes to the local sports to support them. And then you buy a couple of drinks and popcorn for $4, still for $25 for a Friday night of entertainment.
Yeah.
Are you going to spend any less than that at the movie theater?
How many football games they have in it? For you don't
Regular season's 10 games.
how many's in town?
Typically 5.
So that's not a big. It's not even that much, is it?
No. I mean, and now, of course, I travel. I went to Red Bank last year and, McMinn County, we go to the away games a lot and you pay the similar amounts plus your gas bill and everything. But still, for a Friday night, for 2, 3, 4 hours of entertainment and watching a good football game, that's pretty cheap.
Yep.
And it's a lot of fun. Now, like last year, Bradley making it to the semis, the season they had, undefeated and everything, and the talent they had on that team. Wow. I mean, that was something to watch. And, my wife goes with me. She grew up the same way. Her father was a huge football fan. So they always went to Lafayette High School, where she grew up.
How'd y'all meet?
Her aunt, my aunt, and her were taking dancing lessons, ballroom dancing lessons.
Oh, is that
And
Hazel took that, didn't she?
And they
Or was it-
snookered me into going down there, and we got to know each other. And
Well, how long you been married?
30 years.
30 years. So you were ballroom dancing 30 years ago?
Yeah.
Or tried it?
Trying to ballroom.
Not now, right?
It was kind of funny because one of the dances that the instructor was teaching, I never could do it exactly right because it's supposed to take 4 steps,
Yeah.
and I always did 3 steps. And she couldn't catch me out because the 4th step, she just didn't, it just worked. But we got married in 1993.
What other hobbies you do? Anything?
No.
Just work and family and football. That's about it.
Yeah.
And the Saturday morning thing.
Yeah, that's, I do family tree stuff, genealogy. I've got into some of that. Traced out, my mother did her family, so I really didn't have to do a lot on that. I've done a lot on my father's family. And so I've done
Where were they from originally?
Dad was actually from Ducktown.
Is that right?
Yeah, the Tarpley clan came into the United States and Virginia.
From where?
England. The Tarpley name, if you spell it in the original spelling, would drive everybody nuts. It's Tarpleigh is the original spelling.
Tarpelo?
Yeah, Tarpley.
Tarpele?
And but they came into Virginia
From England.
in about 1630s, and then various branches of the family matriculated down across through North Carolina and into North Georgia, and
On into Ducktown.
and my grandfather was born in a house on the state line. Living room was in one state, bedroom was in another state.
On Ducktown?
No, outside of Copper Hill.
Okay.
And then
Which would have been where?
there's a church up there called Mount Pleasant. If you go
It's on the way to Blairsville, the back way, sort of?
No, it's actually going to North Carolina on 64. And if you turn going into the old Copper Hill Airport back in there.
Like Ranger, North Carolina.
Yeah.
Isn't there
And you go back, there's a Ranger back in there, but you
Yeah.
go back in there and there's a Mount Pleasant church in there, and just right across from it is where the state line is, and up that road it crosses over into North
I believe that's how
Carolina.
you go to Helen, Georgia, isn't it?
Sort of. You can go hell in that
I
way.
think I went there last
Yeah.
year and Google Maps took me that way.
So, but then he wound up as a miner in the copper mines. And
Did they come over here for religion, reckon?
really never really have found out for sure exactly why they came over. Just,
That genealogy can get complicated, can
It can get
I mean,
real complicated.
It's almost so complicated it's pointless.
Well,
Because,
a lot of it is detective work.
yeah, because she got stepsons and stepsisters and ex-wives and dead. Because a lot of them married 2 and 3 times because of deaths.
Yeah. And then they have 12, 13 kids.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't.
And they'd be raising one
Yeah.
that they called theirs.
Yeah. And like in my family tree, you've got like 5 generations that there's a James and John.
Mm-hmm.
And then James and John had a James and John each. And each one of them had a James and John. So
It's like putting together a puzzle. Man, that's so complicated.
Yeah.
You have to have a mind for that.
you have to have be able to research and say, okay, I've got this. What's my next step? So,
And then if you get as far back, then you got to go to England. And you
Yep.
just almost can't get the information, I guess, right?
well, no, you can actually, if you can jump the pond, as we call it,
Yeah.
in that case, your records over there is actually better than what they are here.
Oh, I guess
Because-
they're older, too.
Well, they're older and everything, but they've safeguarded their records better. And one of the problems we have in the United States is so many records have been lost through fires.
What about
and
the
different
Mormons?
events.
Don't the Mormons keep real good records?
They keep an excellent group of records.
Why do
And,
they do that, reckon?
that genealogy is huge in their religious beliefs of in the way they marry and everything.
Oh,
It's
it
very
does for them.
important. It's very important in their.
So, I guess so. I guess that, don't they have like a big building that they keep all that in?
They have a huge records repository.
But would they have records of people from North Carolina, or is it just people from there?
Oh, they have expanded. It's not just their religious beliefs that makes them do this. It's also other religious beliefs have their value systems. And then if you're going to marry into somebody that's in their church, you've got to have your genealogy all worked out too. So it's a big deal with them to have everything. And everybody, because of their size and the way that they have kept their records, everybody that is doing it today ties everything together with what they have too.
Wonder if they make any money off that. I guess you gotta have.
They,
You have to have
they
some.
make because
You'd have to, or they couldn't afford to do it.
oh,
right?
you pay them some pretty sums of money to do at times for some records. And
That's a situation where a byproduct has become a business.
Yeah, it is a big business. You got family tree programs.
Wonder why they don't want you marrying outside their religion. I guess was the original.
Well, in some places they don't want you marrying outside of religion.
Was that you? Is that Utah?
Yeah, that's in Utah. But then at other times it's because of not wanting certain relationships. See, like what we talk about now, most of ours is you don't marry cousins, particularly first, second, or third. You know, you want that distance.
Why is that? Because of health reasons?
Some of it is health reasons. Some of it is what they call too much inbreeding can cause problems.
But
And-
when you get down to fourths, is that okay? I don't-
typically they, once you start
That'd be
getting
so.
fourth, fifth, and
That'd be so
on
far
like
out, wouldn't
that.
it?
Yeah,
We're probably related that
Yeah.
much.
Well, the thing of it is, if you go by the Bible, we're all related.
That's right. So we're all related.
Yeah.
Man, it makes me wonder who Cain married, don't you?
Well,
In the Bible?
funny question about that.
I mean-
I saw something on YouTube here a while back, and the little video that they was doing was, who did Cain and Abel marry?
I've wondered that my whole life.
They married sisters, their own sisters,
Well,
according to this video at least.
well, I mean,
But
we assumed that Adam and Eve had more kids than Cain
Yeah.
and Abel.
Right.
So
And-
they would have had to marry sisters. And why wasn't there any inbreeding with that? Maybe
Well,
inbreeding's.
Well, you got to go back and look at the time and the fact that in the biblical sense, God had a hand in it at that time.
We've got to assume that was
Yeah.
the reason.
But the thing of it is, though, and I never really thought that much about it, but it had crossed my mind is who did they marry?
Yeah.
And according to this video on YouTube, and you can take it with a grain of salt and everything, but the logic of it hung together.
And I guess there's nothing that say that God created Adam and Eve and these other two. It doesn't
Yeah.
say it, and that's it.
Yeah. And the
We
thing,
assumed that was it,
yeah,
but maybe
they had to marry somebody if Adam and Eve was
Yeah.
the first humans. And all their, there was no other humans on earth at that time. They got to marry siblings.
one of them was Cain killed Abel, but wasn't
Yeah.
there another brother that left and they never knew where he went?
Yeah, it gets into all that on that.
yeah.
I thought it was a fascinating video to watch because it kind of hung onto something that you really don't read in the Bible.
And it makes you wonder how much they've
Yeah.
how much they know.
Well, according to this video, there's quite a bit of documentation that we don't see in the Bible that we study in church. But I thought it was a fascinating
Yeah.
thing to watch. And
I like documentaries and mysteries, don't you?
I love history. I'll get on YouTube and I find stuff about history, and I'll kind of get in my own zone.
I really enjoy it. And some are done good and some aren't.
Yeah, there's some of them that I just look at and says, "You're crazy."
I've done some of that HBO documentaries. They seem to be pretty good.
Yeah, they're pretty good.
I hate the commercials in the middle and all that stuff.
Yeah, I was flipping through the other night and watching one on the USS Tennessee, which was a battleship in World War II, served at Pearl Harbor. And
USS Tennessee.
yeah, and a lot of people, if you're not really into World War II history, you probably wouldn't really recognize the name. But it was a battleship built in 1920 named after our state.
Is that right?
It was one of the ships at Pearl Harbor. It was the ship just forward of the Arizona when it blew up. And it served throughout the World War II after being heavily modified, and was one of the busiest battleships as far as engagements in different campaigns of all the battleships in World War II.
And we've never heard a thing about it. I've never heard of it.
Yeah. There's actually a museum in Scott County that is dedicated to the USS
that right?
Tennessee.
Scott County. Where's
Yeah.
Scott County?
Oh, not of Tennessee, up on the Kentucky border north of Knoxville.
What didn't we used to have? Wasn't this all around here, Jonestown or Jamestown?
No, it was the original name was Taylor's Place.
No, but before, what?
See, this was Cherokee country before.
Yeah, but wasn't there like Ottawa? Wasn't it named something for a short period of time besides Ottawa and Hamilton County, like Jonesboro or
Oh, you're thinking about James County.
James County? Where's James County?
James County is actually between Bradley County and Hamilton County.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
James County was actually a separate county that basically folded and was absorbed mostly into Hamilton County.
Now, when was James County formed?
That probably was up until the early 1900s.
Like 1905 or something like
I forgot the exact
So it was
timing on
after
it.
Taylor's.
Yeah.
Was Jamestown before Bradley County? Because you'll see.
I'm not. No, it probably wasn't. Now, McMinn County was before Bradley County.
See, I've seen some old deeds that reference
Yeah.
James County.
Yeah, you'll see some old stuff in the
Yeah.
southern part of the county.
So the county just could not afford it, and just everybody left.
It for whatever reason, financially, it just didn't make it.
Well, how in the world would that work? How would you consume it into another county? Why wouldn't we say we're getting much part of Jamestown and Hamilton County gets? How do they do that?
Well, the state legislature creates the counties. So the state legislature can say, well, this county can't make it on its own, so we're going to assign its property over to Hamilton County and this part of it over to Bradley County.
Well, I bet there's a lot of politics played in that, don't you? It'd have to be.
Yeah.
But wasn't James County like a long, narrow strip
There was a
or
long,
something?
narrow strip that ran from the state line and actually went up to the Tennessee River.
Yeah.
But it was between Bradley and Hamilton County initially.
Yeah. And it encompassed Ottawa.
Yeah.
But maybe Ottawa was its county seat. Wonder who the county seat
The
was.
county seat, actually, the courthouse is still there.
The Jamestown Courthouse?
Yes.
Where's it at?
You turn there where the nursery, Ottawa Nursery is.
Yeah.
Turn there, go underneath the railroad.
Yeah.
And there'll be a sign up there right when you get to the church on the left that says James County Courthouse.
I've
And
seen that.
it's a wedding venue now.
Oh, it's across from that coffee shop.
Yep, it's behind the church there, and I actually have attended a wedding there. So it still exists.
So wonder when it folded. Maybe during the Depression, I'm guessing.
No, it's before the Depression.
Oh, so it didn't last long.
No. I know during the Civil War it existed because I have some distant kin that lived in those areas on my mom's side. But
So 1876, it was
Yeah.
a county.
yeah, so I'd have to go back and look at the records and make sure about the dates and everything.
James County, Tennessee.
Yeah. Ron's wife, David Moore's probably saying, you know these answers. She
Wonder
would
where
know.
James County was in Bradley County. 'Cause-
I don't think there was a whole lot of James in Bradley. If it
But
was,
some?
it probably was just a very small portion. Most of it went to Hamilton County.
Probably Mahan Gap, something like that. Maybe, not Mahan Gap, but maybe Boss Springs. No,
I think at the time, I think the county line between Bradley and James was along White Oak at that time anyway.
close to
it'd be-
Glen Cantrell's.
Yeah, that was probably still in Bradley County even then. I think you're looking at areas probably down close to Red Clay.
Oh yeah.
You know, some of those areas down there some of that might have been in James County at that time. But
Well,
most of it went to Hamilton.
When you get out places like that, way out in the county, you think, I've never been out here. I was talking to Eddie Cartwright one day, and he said, he said, you don't realize how Bradley County's so big. There's roads in here you've never been on. And I guess that's right. Well, we think we've been on them, but...
Well, I probably have a little bit of advantage because of my job. I think I've
Well,
probably
I
been on
thought I
every.
would have on the west side, but maybe not.
But some of what I did over the years, I've been on both sides of the county, so that there might be some new roads that might be on and new
Yeah, new ones.
subdivisions, but the older county roads, I've pretty much been all over
I
the
remember
county.
when some of the roads were dirt, and now they're
Yep.
paved and wide and everything else. You
There
couldn't
is-
you couldn't develop a subdivision with a gravel county road no more.
No.
Not here.
In fact, in our appraisal process, there used in some of the old rural listings that we had, the way we did things, we still said U.S. highway, paved road, gravel road, no road. Well, right now, there is no such thing as a gravel road in Bradley County. Everything's
Not a one.
paved.
Everything.
Yeah. So I actually changed the way I work my system with rural land with distance from town more so. So, my location that used to be the gravel road is just the furthest reaches of the county now. I don't even pay attention to the road that much.
Boy, it's all interesting. Are you going to retire?
9 months.
You're not going to go 10?
Nope. I'll have February of next year, I'll have it even 45 years.
You're going to quit and there's nothing nobody's going to do to stop you?
Yeah, I'll still be around for questions, but I'm pretty much sliding out of it.
Arnold, it's people like you that make things go. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Hey,
sure
let's
thing.
do this again.
Okay.